Wait, stop. That's the one. Welcome to ZEN TENN Speaks, a show where I make new friends and reconnect with old ones. A show where everyone's stories may inspire you to tell your own story. In this podcast, we encourage everyone to get rid of shame, guilt, fear, doubt, and judgments for themselves and for others, and replace those with love, empathy, compassion, understanding, kindness, and to do your best in everything that you do. In essence, to get rid of things that no longer serve your well-being. To be true to yourself and be honest with others. No need to be politically correct. That's out the window with 2020. Here, we tell the raw, uncensored story. Your story. And tell the truth as you see it. Make sure you live your fulfilled life without permission or apologies. So, if you have a juicy, interesting, raw, unapologetic story and inspiring, please make sure to contact me at ZEN1021@gmail.com. It is ZENTENN21@gmail.com. Or you can find me on most social media platforms. You know it. The IG, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, OnlyFans. I mean, not really. But yes, OnlyFans. Just kidding. Not. As you may guessed it, my name is Zen, and welcome to the show. Today we have a guest. Our guest today is Jonam Ross. He is a founder of Religion Rehab, and he is an admin of the Facebook group Religion Rehab, Rise from Religious Trauma. I will put his Facebook group tag underneath the video. The group has helped those who are ready to take back their lives and mind from religion indoctrination. The group has practical resources for uprooting indoctrination and building a life of freedom and fulfillment. Jonam Ross is a life coach who helps one overcome religion trauma. He personally helps former members of high control religion group to overcome indoctrination and build lives they love. Going through his website, religionrehab.co.uk, you'll find the assistance you need to build your new social skills and strengthen relationships, skills on how to manage your emotions and have a mind of your own, and so on. So there are some tests on the website as well that will encourage you to take so you can start your amazing journey. Jonam also has a podcast called Religion Rehab, and I will post the link on the description. And he is also a life coach at Love with Intelligence, Relationships, and Dating. So welcome, Jonam, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Definitely. So first question I have for you is, who are you and what gives you joy?
Oh, good questions. So, as you know, my name's Jonam. I'm from the UK. I live in the UK. And I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. I got disfellowshipped about 5 years ago, the final time. Stopped going to meetings about 2 years after that. I kept trying to get back and again. And eventually I realized it wasn't for me. And in terms of what gives me joy, it's really... It's finding the metaphorical keys, so to speak, that unlock our doors to potential, to freedom, to happiness. It's finding those little differences that give us the edge, not the edge over other people, but the edge over our own minds, over our own lives. I love the fact that the problems that we have, they can be temporary. And so to break through that and to get out of pain and further into joy and pleasure is something I love doing myself, and I love sharing it with other people too.
That's great. And looking at your group and also listening to your podcast, I can totally see that and feel it. And so I love how you focus on not only XJWs, but basically anyone from a high control group that's coming out. So so please tell the audience specifically, what is it that you do when it comes to the group?
Yeah, so it did originally start only as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, just because that's my background. And what I found was that the more people I spoke to, I had people from other groups and other backgrounds coming to me as well. And I found there were so many things in common that I opened the focus a little bit so that it's speaking to more people while still being specialized. So in terms of me and what I'm doing with the whole project, it's all about creating and curating resources for people to be more informed about our situation, about not just how the problems were formed, but how we can find and create solutions. So I've been obsessed with psychology and NLP and hypnotherapy since I was, early teens. And I'm not a psychotherapist, but I'm a hypnotherapist working with psychology for sure. But especially what I want to help people do is to take the problems out of their subconscious minds. Because we can leave a religion and we can do all the research and say, okay, I don't believe that. I know that's not true. But we may still feel the anxiety around, like, Armageddon, for instance. It's like, oh, is the world going to end? Were they right? What if they were right? Or maybe the holiday season is coming up and, we feel stressed about that, or it's a birthday party and we feel awkward about singing the song. And these things where, even though rationally we know that there's no problem, we may still feel there's a problem. And until we get the problem out of our feelings, until we solve it at that subconscious level, it's still a problem. Just like a smoker who knows, like every single smoker I've met, they'll offer me a cigarette. I'm like, no, thanks, I don't smoke. They say, oh, never start. It's a filthy habit. And they know it. They know it's bad for them. But that doesn't change the fact that their body and their subconscious mind is maintaining that habit and that addiction. So really helping people not just understand on the conscious level, but to create change on their entire experiential level throughout their lives. Who are we speaking to? Like, who's your general listener and what's important to them?
So the audience are people who have a story to tell, but then they feel that they're not able to say it. So they're either have shame, guilt, fear, or judgment. Because my theme of last year, 2020, I discovered that fully for myself. And I said, I no longer want to have those emotions. And I want to basically help others to break out of those emotions as well.
Nice.
And especially being in those groups, we have people who tend to have shame or fear or guilt about different things, and they judge themselves. And beside that, to not have those things toward other people, to not shame other people, to not fear what people think of us, and guilt other people doing things and judge other people. So that's the audience. And especially in those ex-religious groups, to inspire someone who wants to say something to actually go like, oh, someone else is talking about their story. Nice. So it gives them a voice, basically.
Great.
And yeah, so I started actually doing it solo myself. And about when you reach out this month. And then when I was online and I see other people, and I said, oh, maybe I should include other people to tell their stories as well, instead of just me talking. And then since then, I have an average like 3 interviews per day, and it's been crazy. Wow. Because I post those ads and people have been flooding the DM.
Yeah.
And so it's good because a lot of people have things to say. And I do have
based on what I read about on your page, the group page, and also your personal page, and I went some links, and also, of course, listening to your podcast. I gotta say, your podcast is very thorough, and I love it. It's and a lot of other people I have books and podcasts, and it's interesting to see how everyone's is different based on their personality and on their stuff. So I totally like that, and I like how yours is thorough. And I wonder, I guess it's one of the questions I ask later, is because I think of that of myself too. Which part of who you are, based on being based on being an XJW or being your personality? I don't know if you ever thought about that.
So what was the question again? So how much of who I am is
a Jehovah's Witness, or let's say an ex-Jehovah's Witness, and you? Because I had to ask that question all my life. Which part of me is Jehovah's Witness and which part of me is just me? Because if I was born in a religion, I guess I would know growing up, okay, that's me, kind of a thing. So where do I draw the line? That's my personal question, and I'm curious about other people as well, of course.
That will be fun to discuss. So you'll ask that later on in the...
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
So
Awesome.
yeah, so that's the audience, and I've been having a lot of fun and tailoring interviews around my schedule, and I love it. As they say, when you're happy and doing something, it's fun. I mean, I don't know if people say that, but I say it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Okay, so you say you left around 5 years ago. Yeah. So did you always have a interest with psychology, or did you study afterwards when you left?
Yeah, my timeline is really weird because I was fascinated in all of this, like I say, through my teenage years, and I was still very much in the religion, very much a believer. And the way my conscience made sense of that was that, if you believe in God, you believe in a creator, then surely you should appreciate the things that he created. Like the literature said that, right? So I thought, well, what's the most impressive thing in creation? Well, the human mind has to be up there. And so that was my curiosity about that. So I never had a problem. I just kept my mouth shut about things like hypnosis.
Learning.
Because I knew other people wouldn't quite understand. But I also knew, after doing enough research, I was like, this is nothing to do with demons or opening your mind to let someone else take control. It's nothing like that. So my conscience was clear. I was obsessed with it throughout my teens. And then once I was old enough, I started working and I started paying to go on courses in NLP and hypnosis and various other things.
Interesting. So you said the hypnotherapy, is that pronouncing right? Mm-hmm. Is basically, it's kind of like hypnosis make you change your thought patterns?
Yeah. So before I explain that, I'll explain something else that's in the language as well that's very misunderstood and misrepresented. Most of people's education in hypnosis comes from Hollywood. And, that's like being educated in relationships by Pornhub. It's just not accurate right. at all. So to dispel some myths, this idea of trance or altered states of consciousness, when you go into a trance, what this is doing, you're slowing your brain waves down from the, beta and high beta states, which is what we're probably in now, conscious brain thinking, very present. And also we're paying attention to the outside world too. When we shift, when our brain waves slow down and go into alpha state, that's where we're, when you go into a daydream, where you're just totally focused on whatever you're doing, whether it's reading a book or scrolling on your phone or listening to a song, perhaps. The outside world kind of fades away, disappears a little bit. It's still there, you can still navigate, but your focus is more on the internal. And then the brainwaves can go deeper and you might close your eyes, and then it goes into the theta state, which is more like a deep rest. It's like the space before you actually fall asleep. And it's in that relaxed state where the outside world is left out there. You're just completely focused, completely present in your internal experience, and your conscious mind, that like chattering, internal dialogue, isn't getting in the way. So here's the thing: every single person goes in and out of that state every day. And when we're children, we don't leave that state until we start reaching the age of around 5 or 6. That's one of the reasons why children are such amazing learners, is that they're permanently in this learning state of trance, and they're just sponging up all that information for better or for worse. So in that state, when there's less interference from our chattering conscious mind, we're able to make changes at that subconscious level. We're able to learn things at the subconscious level, where it takes far fewer repetitions to actually get it into our way of thinking, our way of processing things. So hypnosis is a set of tools and a set of techniques, tactics, strategies to help a person go into that state of trance. And it's not a state of mind control. It's not a zombie state or handing your mind over or anything like that. It's just a state of relaxed focus. Hypnotherapy is where you use hypnosis for therapeutic reasons. So in my case, I use hypnotherapy and I combine it with tools from NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, and also behavioral profiling and engineering, which we might talk about later. And bringing all of these together, it's going into that subconscious state and helping my clients to process things that need to be processed, to upgrade some of the old programs and habits and things that we picked up along the way, and to discard what doesn't work and to upgrade things, or to add in new skills, say how to process stress, or how to relieve anxiety, or how to feel more confident, or you name it.
So with the timeline, you said, were you actually studying or you just had interest?
I had interest all throughout my teens, and I started going on the trainings and the courses when I was around 19 or 20. So, and I'm at the time of recording, I'm 28. So around 8 years, 8 years ago, I became certified and actually went through all the training. What's really strange is that I was already working as a hypnotherapist for, again, the past 5 years. Around when I got disfellowshipped was when I started doing this as a career. But it was specifically last year when I pivoted and focused pretty much exclusively on helping people overcome religious trauma.
Okay. And then you said that basically you kept it to yourself. Was there a specific reason that maybe you would?
In terms of the congregation? Yeah, in terms of the congregation, I didn't tell anyone. My family knew I was interested in it, but for the most part, I kept my mouth shut. And for some of that time, I was disfellowshipped anyway, so no one could know. I was an expert at living a double life, so
okay.
The people didn't really know.
Right. I wish I wanted to. The next question would be, what led you to you leaving? If you like to talk about that.
So I was a chronic confessor. So I would get myself into situations that broke the rules or were sinful by their definition. And then I would go and confess about it. Sometimes straight away, other times I'd wait a while. But that was a weird pattern for me. I don't know quite why. And so anyway, I took myself to the elders. I was dating this JW girl, and I was like, look, we're trying to do things a Christian way, but we went a little bit too far. We committed an act of porneia, and we need your help to be able to date and court in the appropriate way. So they disfellowshipped me and privately reproved her. And again, I kept going. I kept believing it for the next 2 years. So I was trying to get reinstated, kept on going. meanwhile, behind the scenes, I'm also building up a hypnotherapy practice and working on cruise ships and various things that they would not approve of. So there was a strange discrepancy there. But I still believed, I still kept going. And then the more I went, obviously, when you're at the meetings and you're not allowed to answer or participate, you've got no social circle there, all you can do is sit and listen and pay attention. And invariably what I'd do is I'd end up reading, say, the scriptures in a paragraph, and then I'd read the chapters around them, because, you know, when people are answering and stuff, I couldn't answer, so I just read around it. And the more I did that, the more I was like, well, there's just total contradiction going on. What's being taught versus what I'm reading even here in their Bible, that's not really matching. And definitely how they're acting and their policies and the way that the culture within the organization is, that's not matching. And over time, as well as other things, but I realized that in order for me to fit in with the culture of the organization, I would have to become very hypocritical and very judgmental and very unloving, and to go against my own conscience. And I thought, well, this doesn't add up. So I stopped going. I didn't research it properly to see if it was a cult, or, you know, I didn't do my due diligence at that point. But I just stopped going, and I started going my own way and building my life a bit more.
Wow. So on a scale from 1 to 10, how was your belief, or were you zealous? Were you an active participant or bystander? If they have, I don't know if they have special terms, but
I would say like a 6 or a 7. Yeah, I was baptized. I was never a ministerial servant or an elder. I had some half-baked attempts at pioneering, but just ended up lying about the hours because I couldn't get them all in. And so I was in it. I believed it enough to guilt trip myself for not doing enough, is how I'd say.
Okay. So one question that I started asking people later on is, were there a time where you ever believed in Jehovah, or did you believe in a group? Were you pleasing men or pleasing a God?
That's a good question.
Or did you actually even think about it? Did it go through your mind at all?
In my head, I did believe in Jehovah, and I believed that the organization was his channel, as it were. So then the rules and laws that came from them, I would just take that on board and say, yeah, this is what we're doing. This is what God wants, and God is on our side. And so I was quite zealous. I wasn't on paper a particularly good witness, but in terms of my own, how I constructed my own belief system, it was very much based on the idea Jehovah's real, Jehovah's the head of that congregation, and that's it. That started to change as I was disfellowshipped and as I experienced the judicial process and the various, I was lied to in my judicial committee, for instance, to kind of coerce information out of me, and the various things along the way. And the more I reflected on that, I was like, well, maybe the teachings, maybe the ideals that we're being taught are the truth that God wants, but it's just the execution of that by all the elders and, you know, the organization itself is falling short. But that still doesn't give me an excuse to go and fall short myself. So I was still very, very much believing it. But then I was raised in it from birth. So by the time I was 7, say, like we say, the subconscious mind, we're in full data absorption mode up until the age of 6 or 7. And where we start to build a sense of self. So all of that time, it was Bible stories and, congregation this, pretending to be an elder, doing little talks. So
right, I grew up as Jehovah's Witness as well. I left the age of 19 and a half. It's funny, I know that now, but I wonder if you had the same. I've noticed that a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, especially watching on Facebook, have different experiences. I did not know my birth date until 19 and a half, really, because that's when college and medical staff kept asking, and I had to find that out. And so I was pretty zealous, and I believed in everything. But then later on, when of course, naturally you have questions. And when I'll have just simple questions, and when my questions they were saying, hey, it's coming from Satan, of course, I would ask more questions, and I was more curious, and I would see some discrepancies through my parents, especially because they were around me the most. And then the elders or other people around and how they would behave with each other. And especially with the shunning part of it, and how, and of course they do have an answer through every question. Like, we shun because that happened in the Bible, and you cannot be friends with that person, or Jehovah's will destroy you with them if you're their friends and if you associate, which I understood. But then just like even now, example. So as of last year, I got rid of 3 people that was very close to me. And I guess the word got rid sounds really rough.
I was going to say, did you like wrap the bodies up in a carpet? And...
No. Yeah, it sounds rough, but prior to not being their friends anymore, I had conversation about boundaries and things that were happening for me, and asking them, hey, I don't tell people, hey, this is happening and you need to change. I don't do that. I'll say, hey, this is happening for me. What do you think? Do you think the same way? Or what do you think about that, etc.? Or this is how I would like to have it. Do you agree that we could do that, kind of a thing? Basically giving them a choice instead of saying, this is it or the highway. And of course, they often will agree with it, because the friendships that I tend to want to have is to have raw friendships with honesty and talk about everything. And if someone is not able to have that, then I'll just consider them a colleague or just somebody else that I can talk to, whatever. And so they would often break my boundaries. And as of last year, 2020 had uprooted a lot of stuff for me. And so I basically stopped talking to them. And of course, they reach out, depending on what it is, I will reply. But I know one thing I have not told them is I'm stop talking to you for that reason. And I have not done that because throughout the years, I've often bring things that wasn't working for me. And at some point, I had to make a decision. I don't want to be a nagger. And I don't want to be that person who, just like a boss who's often saying, hey, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. And at some point I was like, I should just end this. And I'm okay with things being ended, because in life, things end. The day ends, people die, and job ends. And I feel that people could be okay with it. And I'm definitely okay with it at that point. And I wasn't being good to myself health-wise, being in those relationships. And I've learned psychology in school as well, but not as a career. So as of last year, I got more interested in psychology, and I was learning a lot. And I've learned those 3 friends based on what I've learned online. And of course, I just self-diagnosed them. Those 3 friends are the 3 friends they say that are toxic, with that new word. I don't really like to call people that, because it's like a new trend people are calling people. And the friends they said there's 3 friends. One friend is the user, the fake friend, and basically the mindless friend. And I had those 3. And they weren't good for me, because I cannot be friends with someone who's fake, a user, or someone who just mess up everything every time and don't know. And so, and I have not shunned them, but it's tough.
It's setting boundaries, right? The difference between that and the shunning thing that the organization does is that the shunning is a decision that's made by someone else for reasons you don't know. You just know,
okay.
oh, so and so is disfellowshipped, so I don't speak to them now. But the reason why is because some group of men made that decision about them. It's not a personal thing of, well, this isn't right for me, or they're getting involved in some things that I don't want to be associated with, or, you know, criminal activity, or, you know, whatever. So it's not a personal decision. But we do have the right to make those personal decisions, and that's something that the organization tells us is not the case. The idea of boundaries, when someone's raised in the organization, this idea of who we are as an individual is only in relation to the group. You know, think if this podcast was us, you interviewing me on a convention platform, it wouldn't be, hi, I'm Jonam, I'm, you know, fascinated by this thing brings me joy, and, you know, this is the work I do to help people. It'd be, hi, I'm Jonam, I'm from, you know, such and such congregation, and I've been pioneering for coming up 3 years now, and like that's the extent of my entire beingness is being limited as that. So when we're in that kind of a setup, whether it's JWs or another one, our personal identity and the boundaries that come with that are done away with. So then our only two options are to keep people at arm's length completely and just not let anyone in, or we get completely engulfed. And it's like there's no line between this is me, this is my responsibility, that's you, and that's your responsibility over there. And you know, there's some separation there that keeps us healthy and safe. So developing that skill to say, look, these people, this situation, this job is not right for me, it's not healthy for me. You know, you've done well to develop that skill and actually put it into action as well.
Right. It was very hard, and it went on for years, of course. And 5 years ago or more, probably, I've read that book, Codependent No More. I don't know if you heard of it. And so I discovered that I was codependent, and that's where I started asking questions. Who am I, and where does the thin line goes from being Jehovah's Witness and me? And I think I'm still discovering who me was or is. So when it comes to relation with the group that Religion Rehab, what are the steps and process that someone will go through that needs assistance from you?
So you make a very good point about the identity level of who we think we are. And the way that I approach this is by focusing on 3 different areas in this order. So the first thing that we start with is focusing on the mind, on working through the different beliefs and ideas that we have that came from the organization. And these beliefs might not be doctrine beliefs like, you know, Armageddon's just around the corner. It could be that one, but more likely people don't believe that anymore, but they do believe I'm undeserving of kindness, or people will abandon me, or, you know, I'm not worthy of X, Y, Z. So working through those beliefs and these things that clutter up our mind, or that internal voice that we talk about having an inner critic, right? The voice that tells me I'm a piece of crap. That's not a critic, that's an inner bully. And an inner critic will say, hey, here are the ways in which you are deficient and could be better. And that's quality control, right? That's letting us know, here are your flaws, go work on them. A bully doesn't say that. A bully says you're worthless, you're hopeless, just give up now. And a lot of that comes from this concept of sinfulness, where we're not okay and we're not safe. So working through those beliefs on the mental level. Then there's the emotions. There are the emotions, I should say. On the emotional level, we often have this huge backlog of just pain, of grief, of sadness, of guilt, of judging ourselves, of judging other people, of this just a huge flood of emotions that we were made to experience, but not taught how to process. And so what happens, it gets bottled up and it gets, parked somewhere inside of our minds. So it weighs us down. It might overspill into other areas of life. So we end up really anxious or really combative or keeping people at arm's length who we want to be close to. And so resolving those emotional issues is a big part of it. Healing from the relationships where we were mistreated by family or elders, congregation members. Healing from the relationships that we may have lost with people who we've got no problem with. The friends and loved ones that we have who there was no argument, we just left. And then because of that, we've been cut off. Humans aren't supposed to go through that. And so we need to learn how to process it. So after we deal with the mind and we work through processing those emotions, that's like your inner world. And the reason we start there is because when you get the inner world working better, your outer world tends to flow much more easily anyway. And then towards the end of the program is where we start focusing more on how are you relating to the outside world? How are you setting your goals and working through them? How are you spotting, like you said, these different types of people who might be toxic or harmful to you? Are you able to set boundaries? Are you able to create authentic connections with people so you feel that sense of connection and it's genuine and they know and like you for who you are and you know and like them for who they are? Right. But by working through it in that order, it's rebuilding the foundations that we never got given to begin with. And then you can go off and you can feel a lot more confident just as a result of going through this.
Right. You mentioned two things that I knew of, but as of last year, I've been working on, but it has not been a problem in my life, I do not think, but I'm just working on it as a self-discovery thing. Is around August or October, I realized that I had abandonment issues. And I read a meme that says when you fall in love or when you get in a relationship, your past childhood traumas will come up and force you to resolve them. And I've been in relationships before, even one for a decade and a half, and I did not have those, or maybe I didn't have it come up, let's say, or maybe it did come up differently, but I did not think about it. And so I brought it up to the person and then we talked about it, and then they had their own abandonment issues. And I realized that how it was correlated to being codependent, because my style of coping with that is, if someone is in my life, they are, basically, I'm a good guest. People often tell me I'm a good, host. I'm a good guest too, but I'm a great host. I give them the world. If I break down my walls and someone's on the inner walls, I give them the world. So that's how I keep them from leaving. And I've discovered that last year. And as for the person I was dating or other people, their style is they have to leave first so they can have the power. Because then if they get rejected, of course, they don't have that power, kind of a thing. So it was very interesting how I was meeting people who are the opposite. I haven't met someone with the coping style that I have. And so it was very interesting. And knowing that did help me heal faster and better, because then as you're going through it, you understand what's going on. And so my question is, why is that important for someone to go through the process, as you mentioned earlier?
The way I see it is that we need to find the most effective ways to make progress that we can without cutting corners. Some people say, well, time heals, or I'll be patient, and time's been stolen from us. in some cases, in the amount of decades. How patient are you going to be? How much time do we think we really have? And so, yeah, we shouldn't be impatient. We shouldn't rush things or be like, oh, how can I just wave a magic wand and get rid of this problem? Yes, it might take hard work and it might take some time and some dedication. But if we want to make progress and we want to reclaim our mind and our lives, so we're not living in the like mental, emotional submission to the programs that they put in there, then we need to be deliberate about it. So, you know, I always like to view it that everyone has a piece of the puzzle. And so this is my approach, and this is something that I'm finding works really well. I combine it with hypnotherapy, and this will really resonate with some people. But there are other things too, you know, whether it's yoga training or, you know, going off and doing years of psychotherapy or something of that nature. There are many different approaches to be taken, but I found this to be very elegant and very efficient because it's getting directly to the point of what's come from this religion, which very, very few types of therapy will really look at, because it's taboo. You're not allowed to badmouth people's religions. So it's a subject people don't talk about much. Because I come from this background, I'm allowed to talk about it, which means that we can say, right, this set of doctrines, these teachings, these behaviors that we were told to go through again and again, here's how it worked, and here's how it created problems, and here's how we can solve them. So by specializing in this exact area of recovering from life in a toxic religion, it enables you to make that change on a much more elegant and effective basis. And by using approaches like hypnotherapy and neurolinguistic programming, we're then able to address the issues at the level where they actually exist, which is the subconscious mind. We're not consciously still Jehovah's Witnesses, but subconsciously, that's where the anxiety or the triggers when the news comes on and America's bombing somewhere new this week. And that's where it's being maintained. So it's making changes there. And whether you work through this process with the support from someone else, or if you're just mindful about, well, what am I thinking right now? Are these thoughts really mine? What am I feeling right now? Are these feelings true, or are they based on the present situation, or are they reactions to a past that I've not processed? Being more mindful of our own patterns in that way in itself can create a lot of progress.
Right. So as I've read on your website, you help people with their minds and emotions. So what do you mean by minds and emotion? Would be like part of the boundary, or can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah. So when I'm talking about the mind, that's generally the things that you think. So the thoughts that pop into your head, the beliefs you might have about your own potential, about the world outside of us, just these cognitive level beliefs, things that are easy to express in words usually. Also in the mind we have, like we said before, the whole inner bully scenario, or mind monsters is another word we might use for them. So there's resolving those. The feelings and you know, your feelings and your thoughts, they go hand in hand. They're linked inextricably, but we separate them just to make it easy to talk about. With the feelings, this is the emotional aspect of us. This is where you might have a physical sensation that goes with an emotional sensation, which gets attached to a storyline of, oh gosh, this always happens to me, or something of that nature. So I'm not sure if I answered your question right, but that's how I'd separate them. They're connected, but I do it in that order, just because that's a pretty reliable way to work through it.
Right, that makes sense. I think that's a big chunk of our lives. We think when it comes to our emotions, we think of a story, and that can either move us forward or hold us back. usually when it comes to trauma hold us back. So that's great that you help people in that. And so when you help people with their social skills and their relationships, can you give us a little elaboration of how that goes?
Yeah, so the final phase in the religion rehab process is learning how to relate to the outside world more healthily. And like I say, the reason we start there is, why we do it at this point rather than sooner, is because you can only relate to the outside world as healthily as you're able to relate to yourself. You can only connect to another person as deeply as you're able to connect with your own self. So we want to resolve that inner conflict first. Then when it comes to relating to other people, that's a whole new skill set. A lot of people who come from high control religions, especially where there's a preaching element, like in our case, we were knocking on doors and all of that, being able to create superficial connections with people isn't difficult for a lot of us. For some people it is, but in general, if I say, go make that person think that you're friends, it's not going to be that difficult. The difficulty comes in having an authentic relationship where we're not being a social chameleon or giving people the answers they want to hear, or just doing the codependent thing of giving them everything they need while completely sacrificing everything you need in order to earn that love, basically, to earn the loyalty. So learning how to do that, and this comes down to many different elements, but learning how to pay attention to another person, learning how to be present and to see what they're actually showing you rather than just what you want to see. Being able to take in the entirety of their communication. That there are various studies, but some say that it's 97% of communication is non-verbal. That was a study by Birdwhistle in, I think, the 70s. Nowadays, most behavioral experts agree that it's over 2/3 of communication is non-verbal. But in psychology courses and in everything else, non-verbal communication skills make up less than 1% of the actual training, which is just bonkers. That doesn't make any sense. So we love the conscious mind and we love words and we love things that we can write down and rationalize. But the fact is, so if someone's speaking to you, the words they're saying are less than 1/3 of everything they're communicating to you. When you're able to be present and to not be chattering away in your own head and thinking, gosh, do they like me? Or, does my backside look big in this? Or, whatever it is, then you're able to be present. You're able to see all of the signs, red flags, green flags, everything in between, and then make informed decisions on, is this person being genuine with me? And then from there as well, because by this point you've developed more and more comfort and confidence within yourself, putting that into words, putting that into actions is a lot more easy, so that then the relationships you built are based on who you actually are rather than on a masquerade or a pantomime act.
Right. I do have a friend who is blind, and he's mentioned to me how he didn't not mention energy, but he said he found deeper friendships through. He's grateful that he said thank God that he's blind, because he found different skills how by people's voice, and when he's around them, he can feel if they are authentic and if it's real. And I didn't dive into it to see all his process, but it based on what you're saying is very interesting. But for me, I believe in energy, and it's not a problem for me, but it's a problem that I do not make friends easily. I am very friendly at work or anywhere. I talk to people, and I think that brought to being Jehovah's Witness, we can go to door to door and talk to anyone. I have no problem talking to people. I have no problem for people thinking that I'm their friends. But when I'm home, I just know who my friends are. And I don't not, I like to say I do not have friends, but I do know I have friends within one hand kind of a thing. And as you mentioned with having arm's length, I'm I started writing songs and writing more about my thought process and about my life. And I do have walls, and I keep people not necessarily out. It's just like there needs to be, like a better word, worthy, not worthy as in a sense where you're bad and you're bad in judging them. It's just like for someone to be, as I said, I take things very seriously. For someone to be in here, they need to be a certain way. And if they're not, and I do not judge them and say you're unworthy either. And I think eventually I'll have a better explanation, because the word worthy can trigger.
It's not that they're unworthy as human beings, but it's worthy of your trust and your emotional closeness specifically. Yeah.
Right. That exactly.